Kia ora. Greetings everyone. I'm Trish Gribben, the past chair of Rose Charities New Zealand. It's my privilege to tell the Rose Charities New Zealand #1 Power of Small Success story. It's about the Rose Eye Clinic in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, which officially began 2 decades ago. This is a big story from very small beginnings. It is a story about hope from despair, light from darkness. I hope you all enjoy it because I love telling it. Before I move into the background of Rose Cambodia, I want to introduce you to some of the main players so I don't have to interrupt the flow as I go along. First, we have Dr. William Groot, the man we call Chief Rose because he hates being called founder. He lives in Vancouver and keeps his heart and mind on the pulse of the 18 Rose Charities groups around the world. Dr. Hang Vra, the Cambodian director of the Rose Eye Centre in Phnom Penh, who is the linchpin of our story. Our Human Turbo trustee, Mike Webber from Whanganui, who has made 14 trips up to Phnom Penh for professional care and training, as well as being instrumental in more than $300,000 worth of first-class equipment being sent to the clinic. And John Veal, our Rose trustee from Christchurch, who near the very beginning played a crucial role that you will hear about. Dr. Basant Sharma from Lumbini, Nepal, who was there at the start with Dr. William. And Dr. David Sabiston from Hawke's Bay, who was one of the first ophthalmologists to visit to help expand Dr. Vra's professional skills. Dr. William Groot has a rather strange belief. Projects that start badly often go on to flourish. Projects that start with a fanfare and all the bells and whistles often turn to custard. There is no doubt the Rose Eye Centre in Phnom Penh got off to a very shaky start, and no doubt it has flourished. It is an international aid success story. Let us go back to early 1990s, nearly 30 years ago, when this old video was taken in the lawless jungle of a Cambodia that was bruised and bloodied from the years of despotic reign of Pol Pot and his Khmer Rouge troops. Bombing by the US, the Vietnamese occupation and civil war. It was brother against brother, peasants against the educated. Even wearing glasses was a sign of being elite that had to be stamped out. It is estimated the population was reduced by 1/3. One estimate says only 14 doctors remained alive for the population of about 5 million, about the same as New Zealand today. Just think of our eye specialists that we have in the eye institutes we attend as first world patients. Into this territory came a handful of young medical graduates in search, it must be said, of adventure. They were newly trained. They had met at a course on tropical medicine run by a Japanese doctor. They were keen to put their new qualifications into practice. The conditions they faced were primitive. For our Dr. William Groot, it was life-changing. He was born in Malaysia, educated partly in New Zealand, primary school in Christchurch, correspondence school when he went back to Malaysia, England and Vancouver. He had a string of degrees, from metallurgy to biomechanics to pathology, culminating in a specialist course in tropical medicine and parasitology in London. Will had got locked into pathology in Vancouver, and he found it stifling. Cambodia was an adventurous path away from all that. Through his various wanderings and courses, Will had met some Nepali ophthalmologists and was struck by what he calls their extraordinary competence, their Kiwi-like ability to be undeterred by incredible difficulties in field work. They would just roll up their sleeves and do it. and an amazing aptitude for dealing with the nightmare of the Cambodian bureaucratic maze. He sought one for his team, and along came Dr. Basant Raj Sharma, newly graduated from Kathmandu University and on his way to postgraduate training in ophthalmology. Basant is the only son of parents who between them had 32 siblings. They chose to have an only child, the son whose education meant the world to them, the son for whom they'd prayed offerings to the gods and sacrificed a great deal. He was ready to escape from years of study and pressure to perform. He was wild, Will says of Basant. One of my biggest challenges was keeping him alive. I had to keep my eyes on him the whole time. Basant was a huge help, Will says. Without his input and knowledge, there is no way our program would have got off the ground. I felt that we all had a grail-like vision, says Will. We all helped and supported each other. Our combined sense of humour saw us through. As someone lucky enough to be with these guys at a reunion in Phnom Penh, I can attest to this. Laughter and whiskey are great Rose combinations. You would need a sense of humour for a situation like this. Stories abound from these wild pioneer days in Cambodia. By Will's standards of safety and hygiene, the very thought of operating on an earth or mud floor was out of the question. Basant, who was used to conditions in Nepal, taught me a lot, Will says. I was worried about not having the white tiled floors and sterilisation that I was used to. Earth is better in these circumstances, said Basant. Better for the spilt blood and bits to soak into than to be mounting up on a hard, dirty surface. It wasn't all mud and dung. Here is young Will going to work in a pirogue with a gorgeous young French doctor. One of my favourite stories is around 1998 when the first rural Rose eye camps were happening. Surgery was underway in a thatched hut when down came the rain, dripping through the roof. Well, thought Will, that's the end of that. Not so. A Nepali colleague saw a motorcycle, siphoned petrol out of it with a syringe and injected it into a lump of polyfoam up on the roof. The stuff swelled into a putty-like substance, the raindrops stopped getting through, and surgery continued. Coming from the West, I would have given up long before, says Will. But the ingenious Nepalis, no way. I learned a big lesson in expectations and adapting to local conditions then. Now I begin a timeline approach. By 1998, Dr. William had the embryo Rose Eye Centre getting going in Phnom Penh. It was housed in a dilapidated, unused building down a dusty road in a complex that was designated by Cambodia's newly formed Ministry of Health to provide health care for very poor people, of whom there were millions. Rudimentary equipment had been donated from Rose Canada, and here I give thanks to Rose Canada, who has been our partner in aid all the way through. We New Zealand Roses salute them. Enter the hero of this story, Dr. Hang Vra, the Cambodian director of the Rose Eye Clinic in Phnom Penh. I have to digress a little to Vra's story. Hang Vra was born in 1965 and was 12 years old when Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia. He was confined to a rural camp about 10 k's from Phnom Penh and made to work tilling fields from dawn to dusk, 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. He was fed a bowl of rice a day, just enough to keep him alive. Some schooling was included in the long days, and Vra worked hard at his studies. Even then, he wanted to jump to the top of the class. Vra's farmer father had died. 2 out of 3 brothers were killed by the Khmer Rouge. His mother and baby sister had escaped the killing machine and lived in Phnom Penh with Vra's grandparents. As he grew older, Vra used to wait till guards nodded off to sleep, escape from the camp, run on the dirt roads, dodging soldiers and anyone likely to question him, find his mother for a few hours' comfort, then run back to be in his bed before day broke and the dormitory awoke. Vra was 18 when the Russians arrived in Phnom Penh in support of the government imposed by a Vietnamese invasion. Somehow, as he describes it, in the mayhem and misery, he got noticed as a bright boy with a good, hard-working attitude that was important to the socialist Russians. He was sent to Moscow to study at Moscow University, at first in philosophy. But when he was 24, he made the switch to study medicine. Vra noticed how doctors in Moscow were only interested in the rich patients, and he resolved to do things differently. He has undoubtedly lived up to that. One day, when Vra was on holiday from his medical studies at a seaside resort in Ukraine, he met Natalia, who was born there. In those days, Natalia, aged 18, was a graphic designer. It must have been love at first sight. Her life was literally turned upside down and inside out. She arrived in Phnom Penh the next year with their firstborn son and soon found herself helping every day at the rudimentary clinic. Vra has said to me, when Natalia came to Cambodia, she didn't think about philosophical things. She didn't think about helping the poor, about being a nurse or a doctor. Now she is a Buddhist, a specialist ophthalmologist, a Cambodian citizen. She is the best, he says proudly. Everyone asks to see the foreign Russian doctor. Here is a photo of Natalia and Vra at her 40th birthday with their 3 sons. Around 1999, Vra was employed as a junior doctor at the Rose Eye Centre that Dr. William had set up. His initial specialty was gynecology, but gradually it became apparent that eye care was the greatest need. Poor diet, long hours working under the sun in hot, dry, dusty, often smoky conditions, perhaps genetics, led to early onset of vision problems and blindness. A blind mother or father meant a child had to stay home from school to look after their parent or help with younger siblings. Dr. Will quickly recognised Vra's commitment to work for his fellow Cambodians who'd suffered so brutally, and his particular interest and skills in eye surgery. Vra used to teach himself by dissecting animal eyes after hours. Word soon spread about possible help for those with damaged sight who numbered in their thousands. People would walk for miles, even days, sometimes in appalling conditions, to wait patiently by a little shrine under mango trees to be treated by the kind young Dr. Vra. It was not long before Vra had exercise books filled with handwritten pages of patients' names and a record of their treatment as the clinic slowly acquired chairs, tables, a bed for surgery, a couple of beds for post-op recovery, a sterilizer, basic instruments. After 4 years, about 60 to 100 patients were arriving every Monday morning. Most often they would receive surgery from Dr. Vra that same day and be sent home. Some would stay overnight in their day clothes in the recovery ward, a space with the ceiling about to fall down where someone from their family could look after them, guide them to the toilet, bring them food from street stalls nearby. In 2002, the clinic was looted. Everything was stolen. Every nut, bolt, window shade, fan, all the operating equipment that had slowly been assembled. Everything gone. The tables, chairs, medical instruments, records, everything. Dr. Vra was devastated. Dr. William in Vancouver thought, this is it, this is the end. But he hadn't bargained on Vra's deeply Buddhist compassion and acceptance of change in all things. Day after day, Vra turned up on his motorbike, kept watch at the clinic, consoling people who'd come miles to receive his care, doing whatever simple procedure he could, giving them hope that the clinic would be restored as soon as he could bring it back to life. Many may wonder, who did the looting? Was there any justice? Will has struggled with these questions for years and has come to accept Vra's Buddhist approach. They know the culprit and call him the evil one, actually an American. They know justice in Phnom Penh goes to the highest briber. They chose not to waste precious energy, not to spend precious dollars in that direction. They chose to let karma work its mysterious ways. Meanwhile, back in New Zealand, a bizarre but typical Rose Charities coincidence story was taking place. It goes like this. In 2002, Rose Charities New Zealand was officially formed in Christchurch. Accountant Jane Midgley, partner with her husband John in the accounting firm Midgley Partners, agreed to become treasurer. She thought one of their clients, who was an optometrist, John Veal, might be interested in the Cambodian Eye Clinic. Dr. Will, visiting for the occasion, went to Veal's practice to find it closed. He slipped a note in the door. Maybe you would like to join Rose Charities New Zealand. Why would you follow that up? Will laughs now. Only some kind of nutcase. John Veal was planning a trip to Southeast Asia and thought, I might as well drop in to Phnom Penh. As you do. He did, and arrived just in time to find Dr. Vra in the aftermath of the catastrophe of the looted clinic. John Veal was so impressed by Vra and his compassion and endurance that when he came back to New Zealand, he contacted his mates in the opto world. Mates he'd worked with on eye camps in the Pacific for many years. Optometrist Mike Weber in Whanganui and ophthalmologist Dr. David Sabiston, Sabo, in Napier. We've got to help this guy Vra in Phnom Penh. He's a hero. Then began the saga of the restoration of the Rose Eye Clinic and what I call the GKBs, good Kiwi blokes, who supported Dr. Vra, small step by small step, back to full operating order and beyond. Sabo of Napier became the first Western specialist to visit the clinic to upskill Dr. Vra. He first visited in 2004 and made 5 visits before he retired in 2008. Sabo and Vra were delightfully impressed with each other. Vra has the most beautiful hands I think I've ever seen on an eye surgeon, Sabo said. Optometrist and our human dynamo extraordinaire Mike Weber of Whanganui undertook the first of his 14 visits in 2004. Thanks to him, basically, at least $300,000 worth of top quality surgical equipment, including operating microscopes, has been sent to the clinics. I can vividly see the pride on Mike's face when we were shown into one of the state-of-the-art operating theatres at the new Rose Eye Centre, and there was a microscope from New Zealand in pride of place. Also thanks to Mike, 3 highly regarded New Zealand ophthalmologists have followed Sabo's footsteps to offer advanced professional training. First, Dr. Ewan Fraser from Hawke's Bay, then Dr. Rob Weatherhead from Christchurch to teach ocular plastics in 2015, and Dr. Mohammed Khalid in 2015 and 16. He was also from Hawke's Bay. John Veal made 3 working trips in those days. He and Mike have made training in refraction techniques, the making and prescribing of glasses, their priority, with Mr. Bunn. Mr. Bunn, a loyal member of the clinic team, is superbly trained. In 2010, a Rose International gathering was held in Phnom Penh and many of us visited. At last, I got to see and understand more. Vra and Natalia were almost too busy to stop working. The wish list they gave me for the clinic indicates how very basic things still were. It included a broom cupboard so that nearly blind patients didn't fall over mops and buckets, a swing door on the operating room so that sterile hands didn't have to touch it, a sterilizing room close to the surgery to reduce risk of infections. By 2008, a 4-year ophthalmology course was launched in Cambodia, and Dr. Vra became one of the first students. He completed his postgraduate degree in ophthalmology with top honours in 2011. Fees paid by Rose Charities New Zealand. Perhaps one of the best things we've ever done. And here we give thanks to our many donors, especially the PIF Pay It Forward Foundation, run by Sharon Weaver and Susan Routiny. They visited the clinic in 2017. The PIF Foundation has been hugely generous all through. The fees for the ophthalmology training were around US $5,000 a year, 3 years for each doctor. Rose Charities New Zealand has funded 3 so far, Vra and Natalia and Mrs. Un Sathia. Here she is pictured with one of her patients. Natalia began her training as a nurse under her husband's guidance. After the birth of their 3rd son, she began her formal medical studies, topping her class every step of the way. She immediately went into postgraduate ophthalmology and again topped her class when she graduated in 2016. A new eye clinic was officially blessed by Buddhist monks in July 2014, and our trustee Mike Webber and the specialist Dr. Ewan Fraser were present at the ceremony. The clinic is in a 5-story building with a home for Vra and Natalia and their sons on the top floors. For the record, Vra and Natalia, with the help of a Russian friend, managed the finance. Vra and Natalia work 7 days a week, with Natalia starting at 7 o'clock, screening patients in the clinic set up in their former home near the old clinic, where she and Vra lived for more than a decade. Any patients needing surgery get taken by motorbike to the new centre, where they operate most afternoons. In at sunrise, out by sunset for most. And for many patients, no or minimal charge. Rich patients now subsidise the poor. In 2012, our guardian angels, the PIF Foundation, held a fundraiser in Whanganui, screening the marvellous doco Out of the Darkness. The $6,000 raised was matched by the PIF Foundation, and with the $12,000, a truck was bought in Phnom Penh to transport people screened in rural eye camps back to the Rose Clinic for surgery. On one of his many last visits, Mike was at a rural eye camp when 290 villagers were screened. 70 patients were identified and taken back to the Phnom Penh Clinic for cataract surgery, many of them in the Rose New Zealand truck. By the way, many people ask about Fred Hollows and Rose. We are not in competition. In Cambodia, the Hollows clinics are in very remote rural areas. When our patron Dame Sylvia Cartwright was in Phnom Penh for many years on a war crimes tribunal, she visited the clinic and was mightily impressed. Finally, nothing is ever final, especially in Cambodia, where things keep changing on the whim of the government. But the really good news is 2 out of the 3 sons of Ra and Natalia are studying medicine. One is qualified already and plans to continue into ophthalmology to work with his parents. He's currently doing postgraduate training in India. The ongoing relationship with Mike Webber continues. He is always on digital hand, as can happen in the modern world, to advise and support Fra. Fra has recently been studying in India to do something called 3D vitreoretinal surgery. That's as advanced as you can get. Mike is a great friend and mentor to Vra. He made his 14th trip to Phnom Penh in 2018 when Rose New Zealand Chair Nicola Thomas and I were lucky enough to be there for a reunion with Vra, Will, Mike, John Veal and Basant. The power of small has worked its magic. Each one of the actors in this drama has made their small steps lead to giant results. It is a casebook example of a successful international aid program. It has helped restore the sight or prevented blindness over the last 2 decades of conservatively estimated 500,000 very poor people, an estimated 72,000 surgeries. The clinic is now self-sufficient with 4 locally trained Cambodian ophthalmologists. The future is looking good, with the sons coming through professional training to take their parents' place. It's a perfect example of the Rose philosophy of GLOPF. GLOPF is Will Groot's very own favourite word. He invented it. G, ground level, need. L, local leadership. O, ownership by locals. P, partnership. F, finance. You'll notice that comes last. Our power of small work is done. Or is it? Who can ever declare a job well done over? Rose Charities New Zealand wants to give our heartfelt thanks to every one of you in this audience for exercising your own power of small to make this magic happen. Kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawanui.